So that was Lección number 48 by Sagreras. I'm putting together a free book of supplemental pieces for my Volume 1 and Volume 2 method book. So there's a link in the description for the sheet music, and I'll be collecting them all into an eventual book collection. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about a couple of things. We'll be talking about the arpeggio texture and the balance between the different voicings or voices, as well as an alternative fingering for one of the measures. So this piece is very uniform from start to finish, making it a great little etude for students. And there's three voices that are presented: a bass voice, an accompaniment voice, and a melody or upper voice. So the bass in this piece is played with the thumb, the accompaniment with I and M, and the melody with the A finger. When we put that together, so in terms of our balance of the voices, we want that melody to come out the most. And I know it's a very simple melody when you look at it one measure at a time, but across the measures, it emerges as a clear melody. So we want that melody to be the most prominent. The next most prominent voice can be the bass voice. It has to be resonant enough that it carries us through the measure. And it's so far below the melody that there'll never be any kind of confusion that it's interfering with the melody. So melody, bass, and then your accompaniment should be the softest. It should be quite suppressed. When it's presented nicely like that, the melody should come out nice and prominently. If you didn't do that with the accompaniment, it can sound a little bit chunky and it can really interfere with that melody. You know, all that activity, although it's interesting, does really interfere with the simplicity of the melody. And you know, it takes away from that melody, the prominence of the melody. So that's something you want to work on. And when you think about practicing it, instead of thinking of using more force with the A finger, just try to do a deeper follow-through. Like as a practice method, you can even touch your palm, although you won't do that when you're playing, of course. But just by doing a deeper follow-through with that finger, that's usually enough to push that note out a little bit more. But you should also practice making your I and M finger very soft so you don't have to work too hard to push that melody out. You should over-exaggerate when you practice. You know, you can just start doing that. Just like make it a whisper, right? That way when you actually go to play it, you have some muscle memory that says to play those notes nice and soft. There's still, even though you're going to be bringing out that note, there still can be some subtlety. I usually like to grow a little bit and then back off the final note in the measure, just so I don't get like thump, 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 3 notes in a row. But there's a little bit of a contour to it, but you can experiment with that depending on your level. Besides that, there's only one fingering suggestion that I have, and I think the way that my left-hand fingering in this piece is presented, I think that's a really good thing for students to do, especially if you're at like the end of my first method book or the very beginning of my second method book. You should just keep the fingering as I've written it in the score. But when you get to measure 6, the issue is this, is when we use the fingering presented, which I do use with students at the early levels, the final note is an A, but the next note is a B with that same finger. And so that it's tough to make it really legato because you have to jump a second finger to a different string in the time span of a 16th note. So I'll show you an alternative fingering, but the reason I don't use the alternative fingering, and neither does Sagreras, is that really when students are first securing their foundational technique, they're learning good fingering foundations and good hand positions, and we just don't want to mess with that too much. We want to keep things pretty simple as teachers, keep things simple, ingrain really good habits instead of spicing up the fingering with different shapes and like oddity fingerings. However, if you feel like your hand positions are pretty secure, you can try this out. So it's something, I'll suggest that it's something extra. So in measure 6, instead of playing with your second finger on A and dealing with that jump, you can use your third finger on A. Look where that leaves my second finger. My second finger can just hover over the next note it has to play. And then, let me play that properly. And then you have the next measure secure. Let me play from measure 5. So that's just a more legato fingering, but it's an oddity. So when I'm teaching beginner students, I don't throw in very many oddities because I want them first to make sure they have good hand positions and good posture, and then that they have good fingering habits. So they're playing the notes as, I've suggested, usually A's with your second finger, D with your fourth finger, F with your first finger. So once that's established, you can try out the alternative fingering if you wish to make it a little bit more legato between measure 6 and 7. Now the piece can be played fast. Or it can be played slowly. When you play it quickly, some of your priorities will change towards tempo and the way you create contour across the measures. When you play it slowly, it's just an opportunity to really do a great job with that musical balance. So the slower you play, the more opportunity that you have to create a beautiful musical balance. So it's kind of a game. It's like as the tempo goes up, certain subtleties are no longer available to you, but other challenges exist. And when you slow the tempo down, you have an opportunity to present different musical elements. So it doesn't matter what speed you play it, there's an opportunity to work on numerous things in this piece.